It's like we haven't done 50 shows together. I love it. Man, this is very strange.
So for those of you that are out there somewhere, we appreciate your patience also. Don't leave. It'll be worth, I'm telling you, I will make it worth your time to stay here because this is the most common question that happens we have a couple of consumers on here today. We have some professionals on here today. We have some other people that don't know why they're here still,
All
but they're
right,
staying
we
with
are
us.
live. We are live. So let me take over. Hey, so without any further ado, welcome everyone to the Healthy Indoors live show. I'm your host, Bob Carell. I'm the publisher and founder of Healthy Indoors magazine. Thank you so much for joining us. Sorry for a little bit of delay here. We had some link issues. It's a Thursday, so we're doing a little bit different format than normal today. We're actually going to open up the cameras to our live studio audience in our Zoom meeting early on. Joining us today as our guest slash returning champion co-host is Joe Medosh, who's the healthy building scientist from Hayward Score. He's coming to us live from Loveland, Colorado. So welcome, Joe. Good to see you here.
Good to be back.
And welcome to everybody else. Thanks so much for joining us on our audience. So we're going to switch over to that wonderful audience view, which we don't normally do. Right away. And today is really going to be more of an open discussion. So we're looking to get commentary from our live studio audience and have you all definitely play a part interjecting with us. So greetings. Joe, what's been going on? It's been a while since you've been
Oh,
on this show.
it has been a while, but we actually are doing a once a month after hours show. And in fact, I have my after hours shirt on just so remind people that you can catch us once a month if you really want to see what we're like. We don't have to be cautious about kind of what we say and bring on some unique guests and talk about stuff as though we were just at a conference or just bumping into you somewhere saying, "Hey, what's going on?" Or, "Oh my God, can you believe what so and so is doing?" Or the crazy stuff that's going on with ionization and others. So we're able to talk freely without feeling as though we need to be cautious about getting sued. So we'll get sued after every Tuesday event. So that's our goal. So
Yeah, so that alarms me on a couple levels of what you just said, but yeah. So we're not. I just want to clarify that we're not looking to get sued every Wednesday morning. And
what? I
also
thought
to
that was our disclaimer. So okay.
it wasn't a very good disclaimer. So anyway, yeah, so the after hours show, it's available up on the healthyindoors.com site. That's going to be a monthly show though. So I don't know. Did you clarify that?
Yeah, I
It's
said monthly. Yeah,
it's yeah,
every
once a
Tuesday.
month on a Tuesday toward the end of the month, from 7 to 8:30 p.m. Eastern time in the U.S. time zone. We did have two guests live from Shanghai this past Tuesday for our premiere episode. It was fantastic. We actually were able to link up better than this afternoon, which seems odd. Anyway, so let's
Well, there was a connection in why I brought in lawsuits. Okay, and that is that I'm sure many of you get the questions or comments like, "Hey, I'm thinking about becoming somebody who does more IAQ stuff, or I'm thinking about becoming a mold tester or inspector, or I'm going to go take that test." And a lot of people come from the energy world, so they're like, "Yeah, I'm doing energy." And number one question, which we're going to focus on today, is like, "Oh, can you test my air?" Okay, so you're doing energy, and they're like, "Oh, yeah, but I need to get my air tested." So I just want to remind people that there are not many people that get sued because they did not promise the exact savings from their energy retrofit. Right? That's a very rare thing to get sued for. But it is very common to get sued because you decided to make comments about, oh, that's some black mold or whatever kind of issues about mold or asbestos or not. Those are the things that will get you sued because there are lawyers who do nothing except work with clients who say that you had false information or you weren't qualified to make these kind of comments. So I did want to bring that up as there is an issue with oversensitivity and extreme litigation that happens in this industry. And that's why some people are smart to be cautious. They do get the proper training. They have the right credentials. They're using the right equipment. They make sure it's calibrated. So if you're not doing all those things and following the newest industry standards, you better make sure you have good disclosures and disclaimers and a good lawyer all in that line. So
yeah,
yeah.
and I'd follow up on that. That's what Joe's referencing is predominantly the United States, right? Because we're very litigious in the U.S., and it's not as much the case in other countries, and we are viewed around the world. So it's important to delineate that. Even in Canada, there you don't see as many frivolous lawsuits happening as you do here. So yeah, that's been one of Joe. It's funny you mentioned that because that's been one of my big contentions too. Because especially mold, the mold industry, there's no real accepted standards, what passes, what fails, what's good, what's bad. So consultants are making these numbers up every time, right? How many spores per cubic meter, or colony forming units per square inch, like what justifies passing a project. And so since we're making those numbers up, it's pretty subjective, and you're definitely opening yourself up to, I think, larger liability than a more delineated pass fail, such as asbestos or radon, where it's 4 picocuries in the US you're shooting to get below. You can make it a lot clearer. So I will ask all of you, there's many here in our live studio audience here in the Zoom meeting for our show today. Turn your cameras on if you don't mind, because we're going to actually invite you to start getting right into the discussions. So Joe, what was your first question?
Yeah, so the most common question that I come across, and from others that call me, and they'd be like, "Guy, so Joe, my client wants to get their air tested, right? And can you test my air?" Is a common thing you'll get. The underlying question, what they're really asking, is that I think I have mold. Can you test for mold? Okay, so that's really what they're asking. But they come across it, but can you test my air? And usually those of us that are doing it a long time, they're like, what do you want me to test it for? Okay, so unless there's a water damage or something like that, then you get into this challenge as to people think that and I describe it's not a blood test. Like what you do in a house and you're trying to test the air is not a blood test. I can't just say, okay, I'm going to do a sample test here. I'm going to raise my little gadget and say, okay, I tested the air and it tells me everything I need to know. That's really not the reality that sometimes consumers feel that
You don't have a
technology.
tricorder.
Well, actually, I do. Actually, I could get it
Yeah.
off my shelf. I have a
Actually, I want to
replica.
buy one just to have it to
Yeah.
wave it around like Sulu,
Yeah,
or
yeah, I
whatever.
have one on my shelf. It's a replica, just to clarify. I
It's
did
not a
not
real
do
one, yeah.
it.
But you mentioned, like, you're talking in terms of residential, because there's different, from my experience, or my 35 years, commercial clients, prospective commercial clients, and prospective residential consumer type clients tend to ask different questions, and they tend to be getting driven for a different reason, right? The consumer is worried about their own health and their own conditions, and the employer is usually worried about workers' comp or litigation.
Right, back to litigation. So anyway, so that's our first question we wanted to try and put out there. And this is the follow-up, is that then what is indoor air quality? What is it that you can or should measure? What are some of the guidelines you might be using? We all have our own, like, this is the threshold. And what are some other things that you think need to be tested? So if I'm gonna, go to I usually if I go to my mom's house and I want to test her air, she says, "Oh, I don't have any issues with moisture. I don't think I have mold, but I really want to get my air tested. I'm concerned about my health." I watched some show on TV and it says, "Oh, go get your air tested." Meanwhile, they didn't really give them any quantity or quality as to what they should be doing for that. So we will give you some recommendations that are out there for doing VOCs or MVOCs or a variety of other options that are out there. But we're curious as to what anybody here wants to be the first to turn on their mic and be like, okay, so my clients are usually asking, or here's my conversation I have with them, and here's some of the tests that I do. So if anybody is brave enough to want to go there, that'd be great.
Yeah, what I will do is ask that you go down in your reactions button. Those of you in the live studio audience, there's in the bottom tab, it says reactions. Hit reactions, and then you have an opportunity to raise your hand. If you'd raise your hand, that way, at least initially, we won't be cross talking on each other, and we'll call on you and have you throw your 2 cents in. So, well, I'll answer while we're waiting for the audience, somebody from the live audience to say something. Because we get this question all the time, Joe.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. It's really
Pre-pandemic, and
common.
we still got them during the pandemic too. I think a lot of people were more attuned to what at least their residence environments were, because they spent more time in it.
Wait, Bob,
Yeah,
because
it's like
I briefly forgot about the pandemic. I know that sounds funny,
you
but
briefly
if you,
forgot about it.
I briefly did because I'm just talking about just general, conditions. And you're right. People want to be like, can you come and test if I have COVID in my house? Can you test if I have COVID in my air?
Oh, sure. Yeah, yeah.
Right.
People
Yeah.
were
Right.
asking that too, right?
Right.
Or
Right.
clients, wanted to test for COVID in the space, and I go, you really need to. Do you have people in the space? It's that's the vector is the human anyway. Kevin has the first answer. Hey, Kevin, unmute and speak away. Are you are you
You're
unmuted?
he is
You're still
unmuted,
muted.
but there's a your mic is muted. Nope. Nope.
Still not hearing
It's
him.
a technical change. I can see you're unmuted.
Hear me now?
Yeah, there we go.
Yes. Thanks.
There we go.
Perfect.
My apologies. Might have been my headphones. Yeah. So I have a question about measuring total volatile organics versus for specific VOCs, and if you had a device that measured total volatile organics, if that's more or less effective than measuring for the specific, like for formaldehyde, for example, as a specific one.
Okay. Well, first off, formaldehyde is not a VOC. So, yeah,
Okay.
so TVOC, I'll jump on it first, Joe, and you can jump in too. So
Okay.
TVOCs typically, if you're trying to measure it real time, you're using a thing called a photoionization detector, a PID. And there's various resolutions on what those type of devices can find. So some of the earlier incarnations of those things, the handheld type instruments for PIDs, were parts per million resolution, which really is not a high enough resolution to detect in a office or residential setting. That's the problem. The original devices were designed to go out in industrial settings where they were dealing with parts per million. So understand the OSHA PEL, the permissible exposure limit, is 150 parts per million TVOC. Right, that's a pretty high number. I'm going to tell you, 150 ppm TVOC, you're going to be in a pretty chemically stinky environment if you're hitting those thresholds. That's high. So the thing is, we're looking at more, full orders of magnitude well below that in most office spaces or in consumer spaces. So you really do need parts per billion resolution. And there are some devices that do that. I know the Ray PPB is a device we've had, used for years. They're an expensive tool. It's about $7,000-8,000 device. And that in real time, we'll look at the total volatile organic compound. But so to your question, Kevin, that's for a screening tool. That's a lot of times what people will use in the industry to go out with, a real-time PID and be able to screen with that, using it almost like a Geiger counter. You're sniffing with it. In real time, it reacts to the total TVOC count that it's picking up. So that's cool. You can find the source. But if you're trying to find individual constituents, you can't really do it with that. I mean, you sort of can program and look for a certain category, but you're almost going to have to do some sort of an air sample grab and have it analyzed under mass spectrometry in the laboratory.
So in terms of certification, that is something that you want to get done, depending on the certification, after a certain amount of years. So it's just, for like recertification purposes.
Yeah, I mean, like if you're talking for like lead in a building and that sort of thing, they usually are going to do a grab collection canister and then they'll still do TVOC a lot. I guess that's all they're looking for is TVOC. They're not looking for individual constituents with that either. So, and they have modified with lead 4.0, right, Joe? This is correct, right? Lead 4.0, they do allow you to use a PID now, right?
I'm not a lead guy, so
I think they do.
yeah,
Because we always, we try to stay away from doing the lab sample because it's pricey. If you start doing lab grabs, are like, you're looking at a few $100s a sample. So you can run up a pretty quick tab there.
What about a monitor for carbon dioxide and that as an effective measure for good indoor air?
Well, it's good if you're determining indirectly your ventilation rate. So that's really, and there's a lot of them that are out there. We're going to throw out some places where you can go to do some of these things. So I'll back up. So for VOC testing, we send people to Prism, which is now actually renamed Enthalpy Analytical. So they have the ability to do that, and they have a great report that you can pay a little more to get an incredibly detailed. They're doing a great job of having a library of, according to what we believe, these things are being caused by X, Y, or Z. Like, oh, this is clearly a freshly painted room or other conditions. So they give a variety of good job of the background behind that. They also do MVOCs, which if you're trying to find out if there's something that's actively growing. that you can't detect otherwise, or it's a good way to do a background
And
check.
define
So,
that. MVOC is microbial volatile organic compound.
thank you.
But I understand a
Wait,
lot of laboratories. I mean, all the major labs do, do VOC analyses. Any lab that does industrial hygiene type analyses. So it's not there's not just like a single source to get that done. There's a lot of places, and as Joe mentioned, the company you mentioned they're good. I mean, they're a well-known company for that.
So go get a report from whoever you want to work with, so you know what kind of information is in the background on that. That's really what you're after. So what are the details that comes out of that?
To your second question with the carbon dioxide, and Terry, I'll get you in a sec. Let's talk the technology first. If you're going to real-time monitor it, you're probably going to want to use what's known as NDIR, non-dispersive infrared technology, because that's the type of technology that you most accurately and most stably can monitor carbon dioxide. There's also electrochemical sensors for CO2, but those can be wonky, and they have a shorter lifespan. The NDIR technology, that equipment can last for years. I mean, and stay calibrated for years. So most components that are doing CO2 readings will have, you just look for an NDIR sensor, because that's really what should be there. And
But wait,
it's
so let's start. Let's back up for just a second. So, I have I'm going to the Smith's house. So the Smith said, "Hey, we're really concerned about indoor air quality. One of our kids have been coughing a lot or sneezing or a variety of stuff. And can you please just come over and test our air?" So a lot of things happen on the phone, obviously, for all of us, and then we decide when we go now, maybe it's a little more cautious, or depends on their comfort level. But let's just assume it's a year from now when people aren't so concerned about COVID. So let's get past that as the qualifier. So the challenges is that, if you're not doing the really good history, if you're not getting more and more information about them and their house even before you walk in the door, then all the great instruments that we're discussing now are useless. Okay, so in fact, I'll give it as a question, but I'll give it immediate answers. That what's the most sensitive equipment that you actually are able to take to the house, and it's you, and the occupants themselves. So you may not be as sensitive as some of your occupants who are just in tears, or their kids can't stop coughing or having breathing issues, and all of your instruments combined. You can bring in a lab truck and bring in the probe and be like, oh my gosh, everything is fine here. Well, that doesn't matter because their kids are still having concerns. So if you don't start with the basic instrument, which is the occupant, then you've left yourself open to, I'm struggling to figure this out. So if you're not doing a great diagnostics with where is it happening, when is it happening, what kind of conditions, have you changed anything, have you changed your laundry detergent, is there something new in the house, is the house new in general? So if you're not getting that kind of good quality information that's fundamental, then all of your instruments are only going to be a frustration for you. So sometimes you can open something up and be like, oh my gosh, why is your carbon dioxide levels, over 2000, and you have a window open? There's something wrong with this picture. Probably is a device, but let's figure out what else could be causing those kind of issues. So if you're doing that, then you have a good chance of figuring it out. Some of the things you can do, which I've learned this from Carl Grimes, I try to preach this regularly, is don't go to the house without having them evaluate their own house first. So asking them to close up all of their windows and doors, go see a movie today, or go do something out of the house and come back. And as soon as they walk in, see if there's something, it's an issue in the main part of the house. Go to each room and open the door quickly, put your head in and find out, is there something that I'm reacting to? Go underneath the cabinets that are in the bathrooms and the kitchen. Find out, is there something that's happening here in these areas? So if you can try to isolate where these conditions are happening, because most people have their doors open regularly, so you don't know that it's one room or one area or a basement. Those are the kind of things you want to diagnose ahead of time with the occupant, because if that's the issue, the occupant can give you a lot of information as to where you need to focus on. And from there on, then I can do a variety of testing or use a device to determine or conclude what are my hypotheses. I don't have a hypothesis. I'm just roaming around with something trying to go, oh, here's the answer. And that's really a shot in the dark.
Yeah, I want to reiterate that too, what you just said too, because I think it's a really important point. A lot of times people get caught up, the constituents get caught up on wanting to have data, and we talked about data in our Tuesday night show, and data is really important. I'm not diminishing data by any stretch, but ultimately, the number of spores per cubic meter or the TVOC counter, any of these things in the space really are irrelevant. It's what's affecting that occupant, right? That's really the big concern. And I can't tell you how many times I've asked occupants to, be their own canary, right, and actually do the test. And if I think this product, that we've added to the house, this paint or whatever, has been a problem. Okay, we'll put it in a mason jar, seal it up for a while, let it sit at room temperature, then open it and take a whiff. And honestly, do you react to that? Because it doesn't matter what levels I find with diagnostics, does it cause a problem for you or not as an individual, right?
All right, so I'll head down the path. So we're at the Smith's house. Okay, they did their own assessment, and they didn't feel as though there was one area that was more concerning for them. So now I've got my device in my hand. I'm like, okay, I'll go around and do some. So first of all, if you're doing carbon dioxide, I'm now the source. So you be cautious about that. Oh yes, the carbon dioxide's really high when it's near my mouth. Wondering why.
20,000.
So right. And again, this is similar to the people that are doing spore traps. They're doing multi. So it's about that time in that space, in that location, at the same height. So whatever's happening right here, right now, then that's what's happening versus some type of monitoring. And we did have a great quote that happened on Tuesday. So the concept was, do I want to just have, if I have a security system, do I want to take a snapshot, every 6 months whenever I'm around? Or do I want something that's low quality, probably kind of grainy? I can't make out the face, but I can get the data all the time. I can see that somebody's at my house. I can see that somebody's actually my back door. I may not be able to identify them for the police, but I can tell something's happening. I can tell something changed. So a lot of these monitors are trend indicators, but that's really great information that happens. So determining something while I'm there is very difficult versus saying, I'm going to leave behind these 3 monitors. I'm going to email you every couple of days and ask you to move them in different places so we can keep track of what's happening. That gives me an idea of how they're using their home, what kind of areas are having more issues than others, why their carbon dioxide in their bedroom went over to 2,000 is because they're closing the doors and have no windows open. These are the things that I can now discover about their lifestyle, because again, it's not the occupant's sensitivity, but their habits. So again, we keep thinking that there's something about the home that may be doing that, but the people that control the home and control the ventilation or not use the ventilation, to find out that they're clearly are cooking at 6 o'clock because my number spiked on my particulates, and that was in their bedroom. So clearly they're not using their exhaust hood, or the exhaust hood doesn't go outside. All these things are helping us determine what their indoor air quality is, without being too over testing or even confirming what actually is happening from a lab. There's a lot that can be done by low cost monitors.
And understand that the other thing too is that a lot of what's been done in the industry, I've been around for a while, has been snapshot type sampling. I mean, we think about it, a lot of what we do as indoor environmental consultants is snapshots. We're going in, and even if we're doing an assessment at a commercial building, we're going through the building and we're taking snapshots. And there's a lot of opportunity to just get very limited pictures of what's happening in those spaces. If you take a spore trap, for example, it's a 5-minute sample. You're taking 5 minutes, you're taking 2.5 cubic feet of air for a typical Zephon aerosol, right? So that's like, that's all you're sampling is that much air. That's it.
At that time, at that
for 5
height,
freaking minutes.
in that area.
And within the close vicinity of where that captured. That's the other thing people don't talk about is these things do, like if you take a spore trap in a 30 by 20 room, is that representative of that entire room? Hell no, it's not. It's representative within where the capture is. Anything that you can do to trend and get long-term trends, you're going to have a better picture of the profile of what's happening in the space. So you want to let Terry, you had a question, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Based on the reading that I did, I understand, do I understand correctly that if, for residential situations, if it warrants doing some kind of VOC measuring, that TVOC is the most useful measure rather than for residential, rather than individual chemicals in a typical situation, both because typical residential would not have a particular high level of a single chemical, but rather there are lots of building materials and furnishings and occupant materials that they use, like cleaners and so forth, all of which can emit small levels of VOCs that in certain situations can combine together to create a potentially problematic TVOC level. You agree with that?
I do. It's the first place to start as to, okay, we have these levels, but the better approach would be to try to do it as you would the mold sample concept. Is I really should try to do multiple samples in the house to determine where those are happening, but also to make sure I knew what happened before I got there. So it isn't just what's in the house. It's also, you talked about cleaning supplies. It's also what the occupants are wearing. So if somebody who has a lot of perfume or other things, they have candles that even are or not burning. So if you don't have a good visual assessment or confirming that these things are not happening or didn't happen recently, will skew your results. So some of the best ways to do that is if they're away from the house for the amount of time. So most of these tests are usually anywhere from 30 minutes to a couple hours. So the best goal is to try and, if you want to separate the occupants from the house, is test the house without the occupants in that time frame. So you can send it to them or drop it off and try to isolate that. Okay, these seem to be coming from the house. You do need to make sure they have what's called closed house conditions, so you don't show up and all the windows and doors are open because your test is now an outdoor test. So
do you have an opinion on what would be a tip? This is a loaded question. A typical TVOC level in a residence?
I don't.
It's tough, right? Because I mean, like, you can't use the Eau Chapelle. The Eau Chapelle's 150 ppm. There's no way you're hitting those kind of numbers unless you just painted with oil paint on the wall or something. Probably not happening. So that's the problem. Like, if you're looking for numeric values, I think it's tough with TVOC, especially in a consumer setting, to be able to use it, because, like Joe mentioned, fragrances, colognes, cleaning products will trigger that stuff. You take a dry erase marker and open up a dry erase marker, that just spikes the VOC levels in the space. So for me, and I've been a consultant for a while, and I always felt there was value in using a device like a Ray PPB unit that you could sniff with and try to find sources. And again, it gets tougher in a residential market. Like, for example, in schools, I've used them quite a bit in a school environment, going in and finding chemicals in a classroom that nobody knew were there. And you take the sniffer and you go near under the sink area in this elementary school, and find out that the teacher has brought in like 7 or 8 chemicals that weren't sanctioned by the school, and they got all these products in there, and they're using them in the classroom. That's part of their cleaning protocol. So Susan has a question. Susan Valenti, you can turn your camera on, or you're just gonna raise your hand? Are you gonna come on verbally?
Oh, I'll turn my camera on.
By the way, let me introduce you. Susan Valenti, editor of Healthy Indoors magazine.
Okay. So my question is twofold. Okay. When Bob named this show at the beginning, it was like, the question was, what is IAQ? Which I haven't heard an answer for that. And then after that, can you answer the question that's asked by many consumers, including myself at times? Can you test my indoor air? Can you just answer those just simple questions for me?
Oh, wait, so Susan, thanks for being our client. So Susan, what do you want me to test your air for?
My attic smells like mouse poop.
Okay, so now we actually have a qualifier as to what it is you want me to test. So it isn't you want me to test your indoor air quality. You want me to test to see if your mouse poop in your attic is downstairs, or confirming that it is upstairs. And part of that will be a visual assessment. So that's part of the interview with your occupant, is whether or not they can qualify why it is and what they want to have tested. So if you had said, I think I have mold all over my attic, that would be a different type of qualifier to do that. So in the first part of your question, so those of you who have not responded to the chat, you're up. So here's the question: what is good indoor air quality? Susan, you can now do that on the spot, because all of us are struggling just as you are to trying to figure out what that is. What would you say? What good indoor air quality is? And I've done this on a variety of trainings and other stuff, and to see what kind of people come up with. And it is a serious challenge to really qualify that as a concept. And I don't think there is a third-party qualifier to say like, oh, this is technically good indoor air
Well, the
quality.
old ASHRAE standard was if less than 20% of the building occupants are experiencing discomfort, it's good,
Yeah.
which is total horseshit. I'm sorry. That's just like ridiculous. So it's okay if 19% of the people in the building say they're sick, it's a good building.
Yeah,
Sorry.
yeah. Well, they do the 80-20 concept. So if only
It's
20% of
insane.
people smell it, then that's okay. So
Right on, Bob.
But that being said, there's always, it's relative to everyone, right? Susan, he asked you that question because everybody's affected differently. If you want to, all the constituents, all this, all these factors that come into play, and there's environments that Joe and I could walk into a room as a consultant and feel that everything's fine, and somebody's not feeling well in there. And one thing I've learned in 35 years is that I don't automatically assume that because I don't experience the situation that the person telling me this, that they don't feel well in the space, isn't correct.
yeah, well, I mean, our olfactory is the most deceptive concept that we have. So, I use this example all the time. You go to somebody's house and you're like, oh, you have cats. But you shouldn't say that out loud. Like, oh, hey, how's it going? I haven't seen you in a while. You have cats now. So that just means you can smell their litter box, but they don't smell it anymore. It's the only sense of our senses that we can have that kind of will just shut off automatically. Like, you know what? This stinks. This is not something I want to be exposed to anymore. And it'll just stop. So that actually is a challenge, and that is a challenge for a variety of stuff. So formaldehyde and other stuff, you can be exposed to it. Your first exposure, like, oh wow, I can sense that it's here. I can smell it. But then 20 minutes later, you don't smell it as much, and an hour later, you probably don't smell it at all. But it's still there, and it's still impacting you. So that's one of the challenges, especially with VOCs, is that sometimes they can be really high and cause headaches, but you can't smell it, or if you're in the room for a long time, that's a common with couples. You're like, I can't smell it, So
Well,
I
you
don't know
have
what
you have
you're
10 to
talking
15,
about.
only have about 10 to 15 minutes max before you flatten out your olfactory senses. I mean, that's
Yeah.
as a consultant, for those of you who are consultants, and you really do have to go in with a fresh nose. Like I do that all the time when I'm doing diagnostics on buildings. I go back outside for 15 minutes and then come back in again and then go back outside. Sometimes it's really annoying to have to do that, but you do have to reset your nose, or you can't just stay in a space very long, or you're dull.
So Terry asked about what about I mentioned earlier about using monitors. So I am, believe me, I'm on the fence regularly. I have probably half a dozen of them sitting over here next to my desk, and it's rare that they actually all give me the same numbers or any even close enough to what I consider like, oh, we're reading common numbers today. So, but they're telling me something. And each one of them may have a slightly different number, but they're all trending. So if my carbon dioxide goes up high in my office, I'm like, God, nothing changed, something changed. What happened? Why are why is the numbers different? Or why my particulates just jump. So I moved something on my desk, something happened. So I do think that some of these cheaper monitors do give you information that's valid, just like all information you're doing. You could do a bad radon test, but you're like, it gave me some numbers, but I'm not going to make a decision on
If they're
mitigating.
somewhat accurate, though, you got to qualify
Wait.
that.
So you're right.
What if they're what if they're batshit crazy and they don't ever get any? There's devices on the market that are being marketed that you can put 4 of them together and test them, and they can't even come close to each other on their numbers. They're way all over the place. So is there any value to that kind of data?
So I encourage you to vet what it is, the company that you want to. So sometimes they'll make a high end and a low end, and their high end maybe have a criteria that they're following, like a reset certification. Reset is a criteria to have your devices tested internally based on a lab result, a lab device. So you can say, okay, I'm within certain tolerance of these
Yeah, they're
devices.
replicatable.
Yeah. So in general, that gives you some kind of indicator that they're doing it. And maybe their cheaper devices are also the same sensors, but they just don't give you this certification. So I say do your homework. And I think you're right on there, Terry, as to what you were trying to achieve or go with. So yeah.
Now we didn't answer Susan's question though, and she didn't put it back in the chat, but she will. So what is good indoor air quality? Somebody from the audience here.
Yeah, I know nobody chatted away. Nobody was willing to.
It's a tough one.
But if you chat, we won't read your names. How about that? So you can chat anonymously, even though it's not anonymous. So we'll gladly take what you think of. How would you explain to your mom? As you bring my mom in, how would you explain to your mom what's good indoor air quality? So you're like, Mom, I think your home is fine. And she's like, well, what is good indoor air quality? And you would say, but we don't want to answer, so we don't want to bias anybody until we get a few answers. So we're kind of. as well as I'm trying to
You can
answer in my
type it
head.
if you don't want to actually unmute yourself. I mean, I don't want to put you on the spot, but we'd
But
love
if
to have
you're,
hear your
if you're
input.
willing to unmute yourself, we'd love to hear what you have
Yeah,
to
we'd
say.
love, and there's no wrong answers because honestly, Joe and I can't answer this. You can see that we're already dancing on it. This is a tough one. And I'm embarrassed to say that I'm, been an IAQ professional since the mid '80s, and I don't have the answer.
So some common things about healthy homes. So people are like, oh, you don't say it's a healthy home because that can be a liability or a challenge. So I usually try and use the word healthier home as a concept. And then I can explain that I made it healthier because I removed certain things. Like we eliminated are using really low or no VOC, or no VOC, but low VOC materials. We eliminated bad
That's what I
chemicals.
said.
Yeah.
That's the problem. Do we have to change the name to Healthier Indoors? I know that's like, right. Because
Yeah,
I can even define, that's our moniker. That's our trademark and everything for our organization. And I don't even answer, what is Healthy Indoors?
But
It's
my point
pretty
is that
bad.
but you can say that it's healthier or healthy, however you want to say, if you can explain what you remove. So I can only say that it's healthier because we did something that removed unhealthy conditions. So you can say that, well, it's good indoor air because I eliminated. It's not bad indoor air. All right. Now you went to a shift from A to B. So, well, what's bad indoor air? Like, well, if it's bothering you, if you're aware of it, so you may live in a
But that's
candle
easier to
factory.
define, right?
You may live in a candle
Bad
factory
is
and
easy
love
to
it.
define. You can
Yeah,
define
right.
bad.
That's right. Yeah. So it's impacting me. I'm aware of it. I don't like it. I don't want to be in it. So then you're like, oh, it's bad. So if you don't have that, then you're like, oh, it must be good indoor air.
Well,
wouldn't healthy air be air that does not have adverse effects to the occupants?
Adverse meaning?
Unwanted or unhealthy or, whatever the occupants, uncomfortable, too hot.
Good
too
start,
cold.
Patrick. Thanks for being brave to do that. That's good. That's very good.
I mean,
But
that seems reasonable.
Yeah. So he's saying that if it's not conducive to the occupant, then it's not good indoor air. So I guess if you're okay with your house, then and we all have our own biome. We have our own smell that old people smell that that's your grandmother's house had. Smell, odor, whatever you want to call it. It's just there's a large amount of stuff that is accumulated on the physical parts of the floor, the walls, the furniture.
Right.
All of that's creating this off-gassing that you think about as the grandma's house smell.
The individually wrapped hard candies in the dish. No.
Yeah.
They all have.
So anyway, but those are the things that create your own microbiome, and the longer you're in it, the more obvious those kind of things can show up. So if grandma moved, she wouldn't have the grandma smell because she wasn't in there long enough to create that biome that's in there. So and she doesn't smell it, but we do when we go visit. So those are some of the challenges. And to her, it's a healthy environment because that's what her biome is asking for. It's saying, these are the things that I want to live in and live around. And we're just now understanding that having all of this bacteria and all of these components and some of these smells and odors around us isn't a bad thing. In fact, we're actually kind of in a bad spot right now because COVID said, clean everything, sterilize your body, sterilize your house. Clean, clean, clean. And these commercials are showing, oh gosh, I've got this stuff. I can spray it all the time. Don't touch that doorknob without cleaning it. We are going to set ourselves up for, anything. So we're setting ourselves up for a bad spot of being overly sterilized area. And I refer to Rob Dunn's book frequently on about, what's the name of his book? It'll come to me in a second. Well, you can search Rob Dunn's book and you can find it.
It's the Something Among Us, isn't it? You're muted now.
Yeah, I'm not sure how I muted myself, but that was interesting. So anyway, it'll come to me in a second. Susan's probably searching it in the background. So, but he has a lot of great observations about when you start eliminating good bacteria, other bacteria says, hey, thanks for eliminating me because that bacteria is keeping me away. So now I have bad bacteria that are coming into areas in our body, in our environment that are doing that. So
fungi
never home
too.
Alone. Never home alone.
Yeah, fungi too. That's the other thing. It's like when you knock things out of balance, you have the various fungal organisms and the various bacterial organisms competing for space. And that's one of my complaints prior to the pandemic of, the categoric use of hand sanitizers all the time, which kills bacteria and doesn't really kill yeast and other fungi. So you actually make yourself more susceptible to fungal infections by using those all the time.
You're such a fun guy.
I'm known for it.
Yeah.
I'm one of the early
Okay.
adopters of mold.
Yeah, so far we've been able to kill, we'll call it 40 minutes because we started a little late and not.
Yeah, we're going to run a
answering
little late today. You
Yeah.
guys feel free to jump up. We'll probably run the show an extra 8 or 9 minutes to make up for our late start. By the way, you never commented on. There was a Kevin put a thing back in there saying, I just want to just clarify this question you asked. You said you're finding 45 to 200. And I think you were talking about TVOC though, right? Parts per billion. That wasn't a CO2 question. That was parts per billion. Oh yeah. Okay.
So there's micrograms per gram cube is what some people also use for VOC. So there's a variety of different measurements.
Well, in fact, that's actually what LEED is based on, and that's one of the problems. Is that if you use a photoionization detector, there's not a direct, it's difficult to directly reference ppb to the microgram reading.
Unless your device gives you both.
Which some do now.
Yeah,
they
right.
didn't.
Right.
They didn't used to. That was kind of hard to extrapolate that.
Reset also, the certification body also has micrograms per gram cube, so that's also a challenge. So
well, that is the standard that's used.
Yeah.
That's that's so and it is apples to oranges. You're looking at it two different ways.
Yeah. You guys are quiet today.
Well, let me jump into a specific area. And so it looks like, we talked about what is good indoor air quality, and by default, at least I think we're saying that we can't really define what's good air quality, but we can somewhat define what's bad indoor air quality for a subset group of people. So the absence of it being bad for people is maybe acceptable. I don't know if is it possible to have good indoor air quality, or do we just have acceptable indoor air quality? Maybe there's two different tiers. But I want to jump into mold, because mold is one of my favorite topics, because it has been the poster child of the indoor air quality industry for what, 22 years now, 21 years, right? Since 21 years since the mold rush of 2000. And I think it's overplayed a lot, because people have just really capitalized on people's fears, and there's been a lot of false marketing and a lot of exaggerated marketing and a lot of misunderstanding, and I still don't think we really know what the heck we're doing with it to some extent, right? What do we test? We go out and test environmentally. We test spores per cubic meter in a spore trap. How does that directly equate to somebody's health?
Well, there's no thresholds for mold, so some of the other things we've mentioned do have some type of threshold or some,
but they're industrial.
Threshold.
They're mostly industrial. There's not thresholds for the living space.
Well, that's because the EPA says I'm not going to litigate or monitor what happens in your house. You can do whatever you want in your house. You can have as many VOCs, as much mold, whatever you want to have in your house. We do not control or get in. The government's not in your house. They are where you work. They are in commercial spaces.
Yeah, but the numbers
public.
Yeah, but look at the numbers we're looking at. The OSHA PELs and the ACGIH threshold limit values are still based on, a male in their 30s in an industrial 8-hour work environment. Mostly, that's how these numbers come up. Are they applicable to you living in your house 24 hours a day? I don't think so.
No, but the defense is I have nothing else to go on. Okay, so that's the only thing I can compare to some other number. But it doesn't mean that they're good by any means. But there are other data is now progressing that we will have something to work on. So, but again, mold is just it's a money-making opportunity for most people. It's really not something that is a well vetted. It's a shame that we're this far into mold, saying that the explosion happened in the late 90s. You were there for that. And
we were doing mold back in the early 90s, just so you know. So
yeah.
I was writing articles about it before anybody was talking about mold in the U.S. Susan will attest to that, because she used to publish them.
I know it's in the Bible. It's been around forever. It's all over everywhere.
Yeah,
but the reality is we still don't have a great process to be like, you know what, your home probably needs to be remediated, and here's how it should be done. Even though people say there are standards to do all that, but I still don't find them to be something that is like, wow, that is a really great scientific approach to confirming that, yes, you have an issue that's growing in your house, and here's how we want to remediate it without actually causing water issues. So it can be done, but the point is that there's a high percentage of people who don't do that. And that's an industry that's probably, you can find the same thing in medical industries, that people are out there taking your money and evaluating your body and thinking, okay, great, file an insurance claim, and not really doing what they should be doing. So that is part of how, unfortunately, the industry and people work. But I really don't, I'm not fond of the mold industry.
I want to throw one of my pet peeves out. When you see on products and people, salespeople mentioning this, and in the sales materials talking about dealing with mold and mildew. That's one of my big pet peeves. So years and years ago, Susan was actually at this class. So I'm gonna cite Susan, and Tim Aber and I attended the McCrone Institute to get our level 1 microscopy certification, whatever, for doing level 1 mold microbial assessment, fungal assessment. And the instructor was really adamant about how he was annoyed by that. Because mildew, just so you know, for some reason there's been this marketing thing in consumers' minds that, well, if it's mildew, it's not mold, so we're okay. We just got mildew in our bathroom, and it's like, well, first off, you probably don't have mildew in your bathroom. Because mildew is a parasitic fungi that grows on living plant organisms. Okay, so unless you have live plants in your shower, you probably don't have mildew in your shower or on your shower curtain. So we don't have mildew indoors. It's a total misnomer, but it drives me crazy to see manufacturers having that even on their labeling. Really?
Yeah. Well, again, that's why I just said I'm really not crazy about where we're at.
But it's a qualifier. Use that as a qualifier, because when somebody starts spewing that stuff to you, saying, "Well, mold, that's just mildew," as soon as a professional says that, I go, "You're full of shit." I mean, I know that right away. You already don't know what you're talking about. So yeah, I'm already looking at you like you don't know what you're saying.
Yeah, but I have seen mildew as defined as a definition, which is really describing it as a surface issue in a bathroom or common area that's described by over. So just
that's not accurate.
I got it.
It's got to be on a plant.
Anyway,
it's not accurate at all.
Okay,
anyway,
great. So we can argue that, but let's move on to some other concepts. Okay, you and your mold. Yeah, I get it. So, but let's move on to other challenges that some of you brought up. So, we will talk about what is good things to do, because there was a couple consumers on our show today. So, they're talking about humidifiers. Question, right?
You get to hers too.
Yeah, it's about humidifiers or scrubbers or cleaners or things that are trying to provide moisture into the air, which makes it larger particles, makes it heavier particles, and it's easier to potentially scrub, is kind of the concept behind that. So some of these products I don't know, I haven't used or owned, so I'm always looking for third-party evidence as to what they do or how they do it, because there's a very rare that I have good third-party evidence as to what's been successful. I am a major old school kind of guy. I'd be like, just capture it, get a good high MERV filtration. All right. HEPA is actually something you can do as a portable device. You can get good HEPA or close to HEPA, capture it, throw it away. And I've learned that recently that those filters don't last 6 months. You're lucky to get 2 months out of them if you're running them regularly. So I have air purifiers, standalone air purifiers that are HEPA in many rooms in my house. I have the box fan with the HEPA on the back. So we do a lot of, because we leave our windows open a lot. That only brings in more dust, lots of particles. So we are constantly kind of scrubbing our air as much as we can, because if you got your windows and doors open, you're not running your air handler to do any kind of filtration there. So our goal is to try and get as much air mixing and particulate capture as much as possible. So that's one of the things we do throughout our whole house. We have one in all of our sleeping rooms and common areas. We have a dog now, so there's a lot of stuff. I was surprised. I changed our filters the other day, and I was like, wow, these have been in.
You're talking about your furnace filter, your main filter in your house. You're not saying you're changing HEPA filters and portable HEPA devices every couple months, right?
Yeah, no. If you really see, if you're using them regularly,
you're changing the HEPA filter, not just the pre's.
Not just the what?
You're not just the pre-filters on those devices. The HEPA filter should last for years.
No. Yeah, I have a real true HEPA air purifier. So it is a monster. Too. Yeah, but my filter is a monster thing, and there is no pre-filter. It doesn't have that. So there's a skin on the outside that I can do a soft.
Oh, so you don't have. Okay, so I'm thinking, and I'll name brand it. I've got IQ Air Health Pro Pluses in my house. We have a bunch of them, but those HEPAs will go years if you change the 2 front end filters on it.
Yeah, so they all have their own. Yeah, well, but my HEPA is 5 inches thick, so that's what I'm after. So yeah, right. Yeah. Okay. anyway, so make sure you understand how to use your air purifier, but I encourage you to have those in throughout the house, as well as create air mixing, because you can have a great ventilation system. You can have the best Zender or CRV system that's in there, or a Brown, anybody, but they do a good job of pulling and subtracting air. Doesn't mean they're doing a good job of mixing the air or grabbing all the air that's in there, nor do I feel as they're the main source of filtration that you really need in that house. So the filtration is usually designed to keep their own motor and their own system clean. That's really their main purpose. The secondary purpose is to remove the particles and conditions in your house. So and we haven't talked about wildfires yet, but that's one of the things I do want to end on. But let's go back to what is, so there's somebody on here that asked about, so I'm thinking about getting a new house, or what can I do in my existing house? Okay, so number one is think about what are your habits. Do your existing, let's just start with your existing basic ventilation. Okay, so if you have good bathroom fans, are they running constantly? That's an upgrade. That's a really good thing to have. So you're constantly I know where the air is getting pulled from. We'll come to that in a second. So am I pulling air out of the house as a regular basis? So am I using my kitchen exhaust fan? Does it go outside? Does my bathroom fan go outside? Do I go outside and see a damper open when my exhaust fans are on? Okay, so if you're seeing that these systems are working and you're using them, or you set them up to be a constant low flow, then let's also evaluate where's the air coming from, because air out somewhere, there's air in. So usually it's the weakest point, the fastest place where it can come in. A lot of times that is the garage door, or that's a place through your crawl space because you've got a lot of leakage in your floor, or your attic. So unless you have a really good, well-sealed house, and how to professional do that, because getting your caulk gun out and doing some like air sealing here and there isn't it. You really need to have a professional come out and seal the house. If you have a crawl space that's exposed dirt, that is a major exposure issue, period. I'm an anti-crawl space dirt person. If you have a crawl space, you need to get it sealed. That is just fundamental concept, that there's huge amount of mold, bacteria, all the funk. If you want to store, if you're comfortable to store your Christmas belongings or your clothes you don't wear off season in your crawl space, then it's a good crawl space. Otherwise, you should have it sealed, because it should be the kind of place where you're like, you know what, if I really wanted to, I could go down there, or I could put a box in there knowing it's not going to get wet or moldy or nasty or all those kind of things. So if you're taking care of your house, knowing where the air comes from, you've now started to have a healthier home or good indoor air quality, because I've controlled the sources and I'm able to move air out. Your next level, which is an expensive one, is to get something that is an ERV or an HRV, or something that's balanced ventilation, means air in, air out. It's equal. It's creating balances in the house itself. And now you need to decide as to how you want to do that. Independent ducts, or do I get rid of my exhaust fans in my bathroom, which is highly recommended at this point. So these are the biggest upgrades you can do to get really good indoor air quality. I don't use the word fresh air anymore, and I haven't for years, because you don't know where it comes from. So if you have a wildfire and you have issues, you can't open your windows now, I have to turn off my balanced ventilation. Now you're struggling to figure out where is good indoor air quality coming from. So now you're back to, let's figure out localized ways to grab these gases, because that's really what the smoke is. It's a fine particles that are almost gases that have those odors. So now you're into, let's add charcoal to my concept, which is going to grab some of the particulates and the odors and eliminate that. And those last only a couple of weeks before you have to replace those kind of filters. So that's a quick, okay, here you want to hear my idea of what's good indoor air quality. It's a complete holistic approach to the concept, let alone getting rid of your candles and all the other crap. If you have plugins, anybody on this show has plugins, as soon as the show ends, you need to go get them and just throw them away.
You're talking about things that are putting out odors in the space to mask.
That's right. Yeah,
odors.
you're
Yeah,
masking something. That's right. So figure out what you're masking and to get rid of this.
So I got to dissect a couple things you just said. So when you're talking carbon filters, most carbon filters that, if you're talking consumer level or even commercial level, they tend to use the carbon impregnated impaction media filters, which have very little carbon on them. The actual volume of carbon, right? The actual grams of carbon in that space are very low, so they have very little ability to remove, off gaseous contaminants. When you have to start getting devices that have actual, like, for example, some of these air units, like an IQ air unit, they have a 6 or a 7 pound carbon pack that goes in there. So 7 pounds of activated carbon going into that unit. So yeah, that's going to actually be able, that's a sorbent that's going to be able to grab a lot of gaseous material out of the space, and it's going to work for a while, multiple months. It's going to be effective. So that's a big thing to consider. Corinne did, pose the question about plants being used. And I know I saw Susan in the moderation, said, Dr. Corsi said it doesn't work. But I wanted, though, point out, we had a guest back last year, Baran Agarwal, who actually is involved with a building in New Delhi, India. And again, in that environment, right, it's like wildfires, right? Their PM 2.5 counts outdoors, horrible, right? I mean, they're dealing with PM 2.5 hitting sometimes 400 outdoors. So there's no such thing as fresh air in the outdoors. It's awful because at certain times of the year, actually farmers burn their fields. So they're creating their own wildfires.
Yeah, they do in Georgia too.
Yeah. So that being said, anyway, he has a building that's LEED Platinum certified there, a commercial building that literally has the entire upstairs, the penthouse is all plants. Remember he said, I think he had like 10,000.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah.
He's got 10,000 plants or something. And like, it's this massive terrarium, and they actually scrub the air coming from outdoors. They filter it and they scrub it through this whole bank of, and it's very interesting. The way, like, I saw some photos of it. It's like tiers and tiers and tiers of plants. So they have a lot of air volume goes through, and these plants can absorb both through the leaves and through the root structures. Like, it's a really sophisticated system, and it actually does work, but it's a pretty sophisticated use of plants. One plant on your desk isn't going to do very much, like,
well, imagine one of your floors, like, okay, you know what, the second floor is all plants. That's kind of the concept, or the amount of surface area that you almost need.
Yeah, it's an entire floor of the building is plants.
Right.
In that case, but it can be done. The point is Susan?
Just so you're clear, all right? You need a jungle. And
it is a jungle. Well, he has a jungle in the building. That's what he has. You
need a jungle to make this much difference.
Well, 10,000 plants is a bit of a jungle in an office.
That's a jungle.
Yeah,
right? I mean, that's not like, a couple quote unquote air purifying plants in your apartment.
I agree.
So,
I agree. But
you guys must have articles.
But there is a green way to do it. That's what I'm saying. There is an actual way to do that.
And there's a difference between like a green wall, which is like usually like, floor to ceiling over like a big stretch of a commercial building, which like, which has plants, but it has like other things in there filtering air. So it's not just the plants that are in like a green
That's
wall.
true. That's true. Yeah.
There is a psychological benefit that's been documented about having that kind
of stuff. Well, and that's what I mentioned to Corinne is that, psychologically it makes you
feel better.
Really
Seeing plants makes you feel better in the indoor environment.
Well, it's also documented that even if it's not a live plant, if it is something like my background, just those kind of stuff in the environment has been proven to actually be beneficial.
I'm not thinking that a virtual background on a green screen is going to make you feel better in your environment.
No, but having pictures of outdoor environments in your indoor environment has actually been proven to be beneficial.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's true. No, that's true. You're right. There's like, they do the wallpaper units and stuff. Okay. Yeah. I guess. No,
we'll find you.
Yeah. No, I know. I'm not disagreeing with you, Joe. I'm not disagreeing with you.
Yeah, but your voice is. It's okay.
Yeah, I know. It's my nature. Kevin had another question, didn't you? Or did we already answer it?
Well, I was just going to touch on, indoor, the mom and pop question, like what you would tell your parents or about good indoor air. So, I mean, obviously there's a lot of, like Joe said, I said that my question was kind of answered. There's a multi-pronged approach that you can take. So the more pricey version you're saying is an ERV, HRV, if there's good outdoor air in that area, but primarily should be just keeping up on your filter changes, maybe some supplemental air purifiers if you're having issues. This is kind of what you recommend.
Yeah, you can go to ROCIS, ROCIS, Linda Wigington, and she's got a lot of documentation. You can send me an email and or connect with me on LinkedIn or whatever. But they do a concept where they go in, and these are like 15-year-old units, 10-year-old units, and they change out the motor to something that's ECM, so it uses a now fraction of the amount of energy it did before. And they take their super inline return and move the filter into the inline and make it so the entire air coming through now hits the entire filter. So you now have low static pressure, and they run them 24/7 as an air purifying system. So it's not just conditioning when they need it, but they set it up, and it costs, and this is in Pittsburgh area, they're spending maybe $10 to $15 a month to run them 24/7. because they have a high particulates. They have some serious bad outdoor air. So they're able to use a really high, MERV 13 filter with a low static constantly to get really great responses. In fact, when I upgrade my system probably later this summer, I'm definitely going to make room to do that as part of that return system. It's because right now we have these systems where it comes down and goes to a 90 degree and only part of the filter is getting used, and you have high static based on all these things we're doing with the filter. So think about a better way to use the existing system to actually purify all of the house, because that's how it's operating its best. So yeah.
Patrick had a
Yeah.
comment about crawl space barriers, over crawl space floors in the chat, and I just want to just mention it because Joe had mentioned that too. That it's a big issue having exposed soil within the built environment. I totally agree. That's nightmarish. There's nothing good happening with exposed soil, and the whole concept of many of these crawl spaces have mechanical equipment running through them, right? Ductwork, things like that. So, and there, even if there isn't, there's still going to be electrical penetrations or maybe plumbing penetrations.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, honestly, like my buddy Terry Brennan said years ago, if you want the pressure boundary, which is around the whole building envelope, and the thermal boundaries should be aligned, and you should be able to, like, if you're going to draw a red pen around the stick frame view of the building, you should be able to draw all the way around and reconnect the other end without having to lift the pen up. In other words, you really do want to bring everything within the boundary. So in my mind, crawl spaces should be brought within the building envelope, and you insulate to the actual foundation walls in the crawl space and the rim joist, and you keep those spaces semi-conditioned and totally sealed. That,
There's a
to me, that
lot of
works the best.
philosophies around how to do that successfully. If you the Advanced Energy did a lot of great studies on that. You can research Advanced Energy and see some of the studies that they did to show that. In fact, most people think, oh, it's vented, it's good, and you realize that in the summer you're only bringing in moisture. You're not actually venting. You're actually providing a moisture source to your crawl space.
Yeah, the local cold climate center here in Alaska did a study on that, and the amount of moisture that comes in during a rainstorm through passive venting is just incredible.
It's crazy. Passively vented crawl spaces, they're still a standard in a lot of areas in the U.S. It's crazy. I mean, having that open, it's bad in the winter. It's energy loss in the winter, and in the summer, you bring moisture laden air into the space that condenses and creates mold growth. I mean, it's nothing good happens at all from those. They're awful.
We have humidistat controlled power vent crawl spaces, semi-conditioned, only run when there's humidity.
Yeah, I'm trying to digest some of the comments that are over here. It's a lot of great chat today in the comments. So,
and we are getting to that time, so let's get what we can get. And
well, I'm not the co-host, so I'm not going to be responsible for that.
You played that Tuesday night too. So, and that's the interesting thing. So we did the after hour show Tuesday night. It was totally different format. By the way, we went 30 minutes over, or 28 minutes over on that one. The show ran a full 2 hours because we were drinking, but it was a great show too. There was a lot of great commentary.
Well, right now we're almost at our just past a few minutes over our 60-minute mark in terms
Correct.
of real time. So, I'll go last this time. We'll put it. I'll switch that around. So Bob. So if you wanted to tell the listening audience or those that are here today, what's the one thing that you would qualify as that is good indoor air quality? What would it be?
Wow. Okay. And again, this is going to be categoric for anything. I'm going to try to make it very generic so it's not for commercial or residential specific. I mean, to me, a good indoor environment. First of all, I don't say good indoor air quality only. It's good indoor environmental quality to take that up from Don Weeks. Because it's more just the air, right? We're dealing with the entire environment, the sound, the thermal comfort. I mean, all of that comes into play. So it's got to be an environment that you don't feel adversely affected in. You can live, survive, and feel reasonably well in the space, right? That you don't have anything that I can't really define it any better than that, Joe. It's like really, it's the absence of feeling not good in the space. You should. Oh, God, you killed me. Yeah, I don't have the answer. 35 years in the industry, I still can't answer that question. That's pretty awful.
So mine would be, I know we talk commercially off and on, but the reality is you're at home more than you probably are at work, or at least I hope that you are, or somewhere in that line. So many people are now away home more often than they ever were. So I guess mine would be what is to take control over your environment, and that is to we become incredibly complacent. So it is the occupant who has the ability to change that environment, whether it is that you need to figure out a way to get a air purifier in the room you hang out in, or your office, or your bedroom, or budget to get your system upgraded. And it doesn't mean putting an ERV or HRV in, it's make sure that your system is working as efficient as it can to do what it's supposed to do for you. So to me, it's about, take ownership of the air you breathe is really the way to send that back, is that if you take ownership, then you'll be happy with what you're breathing and what your experience is. And that usually brings us back to others here trying to help people do that. So it's not a device, it's not a system, it's everything all at once that you have to figure that out. House is a system, person is a system. Together, you'll know when you have good indoor air quality.
I would totally concur with that, but you didn't ask me the same question you just answered. That wasn't fair.
What's a good indoor air quality? What's the one thing you would tell people? That's
Well,
what
no,
that's one thing I would tell people.
you didn't. What I
Okay,
would
go
do is
ahead, Bob.
no. It's okay. It's okay. I concur with everything you just said, so I don't need to restate it. We're in
But you have
agreement.
but you have something you want to add to it. Go ahead.
No, I actually don't. Well, no, I do. The one thing, and this is one of the reasons that we created this magazine years ago, and we're launching the community and doing all this stuff, is because there still isn't a great amount of credible information readily available people could rely on and go out and get information. And that's really, I think that's, whether you're a residential consumer or a commercial consumer, and we're all one tier or another, we all fit into maybe both of those categories at some level. It's incumbent upon you to try to become an informed decision maker, and it's hard but that's something you really do need to strive to do, because you've got to be able to filter somehow through all of the sales jargon, and that's not easy. So one of the things I would say is that we as an organization are trying to help you do that. And do we totally achieve it? No, not yet, but that's our goal, and that's what we strive towards every day, is to try to make that information readily available.
I'm glad you brought that up, because you are a phenomenal source, and you and Susan do a great job with magazine and a variety of other stuff. And I know, the few people that are still here, others, search something and you're one of the first things that comes up. So I applaud what you guys do, and the fact that it's free. I mean, I get this email, once a month with a topic that is pertinent. So I appreciate what you guys do and all your efforts.
Yeah, and kudos to Susan too. Susan and I've been, Susan and I've been in the industry forever. She has been in the publishing side of the indoor environmental industry since the early '90s, and she's really been one of the leading people in helping get information out via publications and live conferences back in the '90s and the 2000s. So kudos to all the work she's done over these years too. Anyway, we're at that time. So Joe, your closing comment, because you're going to want one.
Oh, I thought I did that, but
that was it. Oh, good.
That was it. Yeah, right. Yeah, I made you go first, and I went second. That's why you were like, I answered differently. So
that's so weird. Anyway, well, tell us about Hayward Score, because you are, it's a free service that.
Yeah, and one of the things that you can do to try and determine if your home is impacting your health, when we're talking about healthy homes, is to go to haywardscore.com and get your Hayward Score. It asks you probably around 80 questions to help you be more aware of your home in terms of how the occupant understands their home and how it works, just by asking questions about their home, and gives you some basic advice as to ventilation, chemical storage, and a variety of other stuff. So haywardscore.com. Is a great resource. Takes you about maybe 8 to 10 minutes to answer a variety of questions and get your report. So it's a great resource.
Cool. I'll do the plug for us, Healthy Indoors. So we're a digital media company, global, and we our mothership currently is healthyindoors.com. So that's where the magazine resides. You could be watching the show, our live shows that we stream and produce are all available there. All the back issues for 8 years, almost 8 years plus now, of Healthy Indoors magazines are available there free, just by clicking on the magazine tab. The new thing that we have audio and video podcasts, all that stuff. The new community, though, is something I think that it was worth mentioning. We are really close to letting the general public into the community. We've been doing a lot of tire kicking and getting things ready. So let me tell you about the community. The community is an online global platform that allows you to actually go to a space, where you can interact with other people from your region, from around the planet, other disciplines on the topics, indoor environmental topics. So, it's open to anybody. You can actually become a member of this platform for free. Again, going to the healthyindoors.com site now, if you click on the community tab, you're able to get on the waiting list and we'll let you in. But we also offer a premium level where there'll be some more options there. But this is just really going to be a powerful repository, and we envision it to be kind of groundbreaking. How's that for understating it?
Yeah, well, here's the challenge is there's lots of other building science communities everywhere, places to go, and we really feel as though there's a missing link for those who are in the indoor air quality or wanting to learn more about it. Or people came today to kind of find out, hey, Joe and Bob are going to tell us about what's indoor air quality or what I should do. And the reality is it's a collective knowledge. So Bob was brave enough to be like, let's create a collective knowledge. So if you want to search radon, you're going to get all kinds of people who are telling you what they're doing, what not to do. And our goal is that the community will be able to vet those who should not be in that community. So it's yeah.
I mean, the idea is that it's even more than that, in that it's a hub. We're creating a hub for information exchange, networking, for all of it. For repository of documentation and videos, for training opportunities, and for even live streamed events, online events. I mean, basically everything that falls under the indoor environmental, built environment hood really could reside there. So we're pretty excited. So Joe, with that, I really appreciate you joining us this week, and I plug again for Joe on the Healthy Indoors After Hours show, because of course that's that's Joe and I are now co-hosting that show, and that show will be on, I think at this point it's the third Tuesday, right? That's what we're shooting for, third Tuesday in the month. Healthy Indoors After Hours will air live from 7 to 8:30 p.m. Eastern time. Each month, and that will be more of, envision two guys, Joe and I, are sitting in the lounge at your pick whatever industry event you might be at, and we're there after the sessions of the day, and now other professionals walk in the door and pull up a chair and we start talking indoor environmental issues. So it's pretty exciting. So for the Healthy Indoors live show, Healthy Indoors Magazine, and our whole ecosystem, again, thank you all for joining us. We'll see you next Thursday, same time here again, 1 to 2 p.m. Eastern time for the Healthy Indoors live show. And we'll see you in June for the next edition of the Healthy Indoors After Hours show. So Joe, thanks again.
See you, everybody. Thanks again.
All right, everyone, thanks for joining us, and we really enjoyed this discussion. Until next time, I'm your host, Bob Krell.